Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. The casual or non-casual viewers actually probably might notice a little different of a setup this time. That's because we are met with a special guest this evening. We have Jay Cormier, the owner and founder of Off the Page Games, joining us tonight. Thank,
Yay!
thanks for joining us, Jay.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And so, Jay, you are credited with over 40 entries of game designs and additive content on Board Game Geek, with notably Belfort, Akrotiri, Junk Art, In the Hall of the Mountain King, and Mind Management, all being within the top 1,000 of BGG's ranking system, which is pretty impressive, seeing how 5,000 or something games come out every single year. So
Right.
that's
Yeah, I'm pretty super stoked about that. Yeah, and mind management is climbing up every day. It's in the top 400 now, which is super exciting.
That is awesome of you. Uh, Unfortunately, I've only had the chance to play Mind Management and In the Hall of Mountain King, but looking into uh, full disclosure, I didn't really get into the hobby until around 2019, and so
Oh yeah,
because
fair.
Cult of the New
The
is
other
what's
ones are
pushed.
all three of those other ones are out of print, and they are one of them at the very least is been re-signed, and we're trying to re-sign the other two.
Gotcha. Well, so I believe at my local cafe I've seen Akrotiri, and
Oh,
based
nice.
on the I think it was um, is it I think it's Watch It Played, Monique and Naveen. They have a really
Oh
good
yeah.
playthrough of Akrotiri, which
Do
the
they? Oh, I'll have to watch that. I haven't seen that. That's
yeah.
awesome.
So they definitely show
Love
off
that.
the ability of the tile placement with
Oh,
the
great.
discovery and the pattern building, which both seem
Well, let's
really up my
hurry up with
alley.
this video so I can go and watch
All
that.
right, sounds good. We'll jump right into it. So this video today, I reached out to Jay because I've been watching his uh, "How to Create a Board Game Company" series, or "How to Start a Board Game Company" series, I
Right.
believe is the accurate title, which is a playlist he has on YouTube of 45 different videos, like where he's talking in real time, going through the process of founding his company, which Mind Management was their first game to bring to market, which not bad for a first one on the
Yeah.
running on it solo. And so today the questions are going to be based around sort of highlighting the video that I watched that inspired the question, and just picking Jay's brain to see if there are any little tidbits that he's gained from the first videos being posted 3 years
Cool.
ago. If there's
Yeah.
any nuggets you can pass along to
Great.
us fellow wannabe game designers. So
Sure.
with that, I have most of them structured in order, but I actually placed this one first. It's based around your video 8, where you're talking about Sen and Matt prepping for Gen Con. And
Hmm.
in the video, you quickly highlight how the board and box are the two main art pieces and like components that you were focusing on prepping. And so that really helped in sort of my streamlining my process for prepping
Great.
for Origins, which I'll be heading to later next month. But I was
Nice.
curious on, now that the convention has passed, and I'm presuming that you've prepped for a few more, if there were any lessons learned post convention that you would have either done differently or definitely
Right.
focused more on when prepping for cons.
Yeah, great. Follow-up question. Like if you could have all your art done by the time going to any convention, that's ideal, obviously. If you can't, I think number one is the box so that people see that because I think that's going to be the thing that they're going to see the most of in any kind of review or anything, and you want that like burnt into their brain. And then two, pick whatever has the most table presence. If it's a card game, then choose the best, some of the cards or whatever. But mine, obviously, the board was the most important thing because that's spread out. You see it, it's very visual. We have a big screen, player screen, but we didn't have time to do the art for that. So that was just a generic player screen in our demos. Other things I would learn, I would say, uh, I thought it was really valuable to have a nice little pull-up banner. Like you can get these pull-up banners, not the big ones that go on the floor. You could do that too, but even just one that sits on your table. I think it makes you look more professional and makes you easier to find in these gigantic halls. And speaking of that, one thing I did that I thought was really cool was it's very hard to find these tables in Gen Con. I don't know about Origins, it's true or not, but it's very hard. They're like Hall C, green table 32. You'd think that'd be easy, but it's not very clear where the delineation is between Hall C and D sometimes. And so people were actually at the wrong table and they're messaging me on social media saying, I can't find you. I'm like, I'm over here. So I made a video and a reel of me starting somewhere where everyone knows, like the entrance or something, or just somewhere entrance and say, hey, this is me, Jay. Let's go to the table that I'm at. And I just kind of walked and showed people the turns. And here I am. And here's the table. And posted that. And a lot of people mentioned that they like that. So that's one thing. I would say a good tip would be if you can bring two of your copies of your games. I think that's very valuable because depending on how much table space your game takes up, ours only took up half the space because it was a two-player game. So it meant we used the other half of our table and we set up a whole other game. And that meant that if people came by and the people already scheduled for the demo, then boom, we could show off the game to other people, especially media that came by. So there were some content creators and influencers that came by, and it's just awesome to be able to show them the game instead of just kind of pointing out the people playing and like, and that guy's doing that. So that was very useful. And of course, if you haven't already, you have to sign up for demos. I mean, you don't have to. I mean, you could go there and do demos willy nilly, I imagine. But I think it'll be hard to find tables because they're all like reserved for certain things. So it might be hard finding tables and consistently. Because I was at the same table the whole weekend that I was there, which is great. So make sure you do that. You have to do that way in advance. Like I think Origins closed in February when you can request an event. So you really have to do a lot of thinking in advance. And that video series, I think, shows me kind of learning some of those things as I went. And the last thing I think would be just bringing some sort of handout. Obviously, you want to have an email sign up there. That's obvious. So you can capture those people's names so they can, you know, email them later when it launches. But anything you can hand out that's might get thrown away. But I tried to up the ante a little bit because Mind Manager has a psychic espionage theme to it. So we actually added like a code on the back of the postcard, and if you got one of those postcards, it actually leads to real in-game content in a secret way if you can figure it out.
Those are all amazing tips. I definitely will keep the walking through video as a tip, and I think I still have the chance to get a second deck of the relic cards in my game. I'll definitely capitalize on both of those concepts. Your video actually
And think,
was. Go ahead.
sorry, that just kind of reminded me to kind of hone in on think of your brand of your company and your game, and if there's any way you can leverage that. If there's like if it's a mafia type game, maybe you got a fedora on or something, or you're giving away certain tchotchkes that are relevant. You know, think of try to lean into your brand and your theme of your game or your company.
I definitely will have to do a quick think tank to see how I can meld the two. I think that's
Just
great
makes it more
advice.
memorable. Yeah, it just makes it more memorable of an experience. Yeah.
Of course, I can only imagine being one of the recipients of that the flyer that could be used as in-game content. Talk
I don't
about
think people at the time, even though I mentioned at the time, hang on to this, it's going to lead to real in-game content. I don't think people really understood that or like, how could it? It's just a postcard, but it
mm,
does. It does.
I can imagine that the second round of some sort of takeaway like that. I think the audience now with mind
Yeah.
management will be much more alert to hold on to
Anyone
those
can.
things.
Yes.
So I'm going to jump right into the second question because I could
Okay.
pick your brain on that all day to self benefit. But for the audience who's not going to a convention,
Mhm.
jumping into your third video, you walked through Panda's really cool tools of being able to download their actual templates. So when you're designing the box and the board, you know kind of what size you're working in. And so if you're doing your own art, you can work there. But if you're outsourcing and having artists that you can send right to them the template that you'll need to post it
Perfect.
to, that helps streamline so much
Yes.
of that production side. Um, you had talked about when the other thing that you were doing at the time was reaching out to certain manufacturers that you were looking to work with, and you talked about the clever questions or what you believed were the clever questions at the time, where if they had a standard box they worked in or a standard outer carton for shipping that they used, which I agree are totally clever questions and ways to make the most cost effective game for the customer you can. I'm wondering if now, 3 years since that video went live, if there are any of
Hmm.
those other clever questions that
Hmm.
myself and other designers or wannabe publishers should be keeping in their back pocket to either impress the factories that we're trying to work with or potentially be able to pass on savings to the end user.
Yeah, if you're trying to find the right manufacturer and you're going, obviously getting quotes from a bunch of different ones, some things you could ask would be ask them how much what is their factory specifically print or manufacture versus what do they outsource? Because I don't really know the stats on this because I don't have enough experience myself, but I don't think many manufacturers do it all. I'm pretty sure a lot, if not most of them, and I could be way off here, but that's just my from my limited understanding of the limited publisher manufacturers I've worked with. That and why that might be important to know is um, turnaround time on things that they control and they manufacture is a lot faster, and turnaround time on any changes, questions you have on anything they outsource, it's just another person or another company they have to kind of email and come back, and it just takes longer. And sometimes that is really important in the middle of a campaign. We have an idea for a stretch goal, and then they have to go through the chain of like asking another manufacturer, and they may or may not get back to you in timely fashion. And so try to get those things lined up sooner, so that you can and then you have a bit more flexibility with things your manufacturer does, that you can ask and like, hey, that meeple size, can we change this? Oh, speaking of meeple, that's another good thing. Ask them what doesn't cost more money. Is there anything that it doesn't cost you more money, like this changing the color of this wood? Does that change the cost at all? Like if if everything is black, wood painted black, is that the same as if I had one black, one red, and one blue? Is that the same, or is that a different cost? That may or may not be. But I know, for example, the shape of a meeple from my manufacturer didn't cost anything extra. Whether I got a meeple or a unique shape, that didn't cost extra. And that's a really fun stretch goal to have, because it allows you to even on the crowdfunding platform to have some sort of engagement with your audience and ask them to even vote on their favorite shape for the farmer. What shape do you want to have for it? And that's just a nice engaging way where they feel like they're contributing to the end product in a nice way. Obviously, asking things like minimum order quantities, that's going to be a pretty obvious question you're going to ask. But maybe even, where can I save money on this project? Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And so here you ask for this, this, and this, and they give you a quote. Yeah, here it is. Here's how much this, and this costs. And you're like, is there anywhere in here that I can save money? And they might say, yeah, you can go from 1.5 millimeters to 1 millimeters, and then that's your decision if you want to go into that, quality or not. But maybe they'll say, yeah, actually, you asked for double-sided on this, and if you went to single-sided, this will be cheaper. You're like, oh yeah, I don't have to go to that, or it costs extra to get this image printed onto the wood. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe for the retail version, we don't print anything on the wood. Okay, that's cool. I didn't know that. Okay, let's not do that. So, or maybe you asked to have the entire inner box printed on, and you didn't think that that costs extra money, but that costs extra money to print on the inside of the box. You're like, oh, okay, well, we don't need to do that. So ask what could save money. What am I asking that's costing more money that's not usual? And finally, I would say ask, who's your main point of contact going to be, and what is how is the communication going to work, and what kind of timelines for replies to emails can I expect? Is it within 24 hours? Is it within a week? That can be frustrating if the timelines are long, or if they're like, I'm your main person and I'm going to respond, and try to get a commitment to them like within 2 days or whatever their whatever the thing is. But it'd be good to know. And is it somebody that's in China that is ESL, which is fine, but just know that that communication barrier is another hurdle that sometimes can be frustrating for both sides, depending on how patient you are with trying to communicate something that somebody else can't understand. Obviously, not their fault. It's just two people with two different language backgrounds trying to figure out something. But there are some companies and manufacturers that have either North American or at the very least just English speaker reps that can help you walk through that a little easier.
Those are all the. I mean, there's a ton of little bits that you just gave for the audience there. I definitely think the communicating upfront, sort of like what the timeline you're going to look and expect between to hold for both of you for communication, as well as trying to understand how many points of contact you have to talk through for design changes, will definitely give you a great understanding of the timeline up front, as well as that what you had referenced with the custom meeples, or custom components that you're getting cut, really can, if it's not going to cost any extra money, is going to really up that perceived value of your game too, because open a box with six of the same shape versus six unique shapes definitely gives that opening feel to the customer that I think people would be missing an
That
opportunity if they didn't capitalize on that.
that might cost more, having six unique shapes, but having one maple shape versus one unique
Oh,
shape.
gotcha, that deviates from like the standard what you see in every game, right,
Yeah,
right. Even still, that I
quite
still
good
think
on
that's
that. Yeah,
I still think that's a great opportunity to
it
capitalize
is.
on.
It is.
I quickly wanted to pass on some of my professional mistakes that I've made in the past from a logistics purpose. You were talking about the so outer cartons are what the games will get shipped in, and usually it'll come in, depending on the box size, 12 units or things like that. You may want to keep in mind that if you order, say 1,500 units, but it comes in packs of 12, you probably either want to round up or round down to that outer carton size. Otherwise, you're going to end up shipping empty space, which I've learned through trial and error of that not to do that, as well as when they palletize the outer cartons on the pallets, you're restricted to only having rows of two. You can't do a 3 by 3 grid because all of those center outer cartons get isolated where they have to totally strip down the palette to be able to scan all the barcodes and import. So that adds a ton of unforeseen costs too if you're trying to get almost too clever with trying to fit as
Mm,
many outer cartons on the game. Um,
right. That's a
Not
good tip.
totally
I don't
board
know if I
game
do that.
related, but just experience I've learned from my day job, professional
Love it.
background.
Love it.
Jumping into the third question of the series, in video 6, you talk about building out a list of components for the base game versus the Ducks game, and you do a really awesome job of just doing that stream of consciousness conversation of talking through your thought process of breaking out each part. I'm curious, though, sort of reflecting on that, do you think how much of that like was doing it too early, did that steer you in a direction you hoped the game didn't go, or were there benefits of like getting that out right at the front, especially from being on the publishing side of the game? If there were really some maybe not cost savings, but like time and
Mhm.
like order of operations savings, any tips around that of why you might want to do the list right at the beginning almost?
Yeah, I don't think there's any disadvantage to doing it early because any and every manufacturer out there will want to give you a quote. And once you make one board game, they all come out of the woodwork and they all want to give you quotes for your future games. But so I don't think there's any issue there from that perspective. And then the benefit from you, even if it's like 60, 70, 80% of what you're really getting, your end game is going to actually have, it's going to give you some information. It's going to give you like, oh my goodness, this is costing me way more than I thought it was. And then it's up to you to figure out, okay, are you okay with having an $80 game on Kickstarter, or do you want to get it down to 60? And what is that going to entail? What do you have to take out? So getting it early will help you just guide you immediately. You're like, I did not realize, like, for example, for Harrow County, I was thinking of doing deluxe and thinking of adding metal coins because that's a thing that's in a lot of deluxe, out of metal coins, right? And the metal coins, it was like, man, from cardboard, which was for all the tokens for just cardboard was like, I'm just going to paraphrase. It's not real numbers because I
Mm-hmm.
can't remember exactly, but like 69 cents for all the cardboard tokens for all the little ability tokens. And then to go up to wood, it was like a dollar 18 or dollar 27 or something like that. And then go to metal coins was $8.
Jeez.
And I'm like, what? And so that was really wild, and it actually made me go to a third tier. So I had a retail one for Harrow County, retail one, deluxe, and then we called it a satchel edition, which literally just had metal coins and a sheath over top of it, like a little satchel. And going back to the getting the quote, when um, uh, I get the quote again once I'm nearing the end of development to see now to see the this is now where we're at with pricing. So I have kind of all along the way I'm kind of guesstimating when I had, oh, they said it would cost this much for 23 of these and now I'm down to 16. So I kind of math it out to figure out what that price could be, even though, just to figure it out. And then eventually you need actual real numbers again once you're near end of development and you're like, okay, now let's get a quote now because I think this is like now we're up to 90-95% done. And then in that quote, I'll even have list my stretch goals. And I want this separated. Here's my stretch goals, and it's listed differentiated from here's retail, here's deluxe. So I get everything, and every single thing is separated. So I can take things out or put things in and see if I take this out, is that going to make this? How much is this worth, and all that kind of stuff. And I noticed for this again for Harrow County, for the longest time, it always had three maps in the game. And then as I was doing all the math and evaluating and stuff, like, oh, it was getting up there for price. And I'm like, I can't charge this much for it. So I had to get rid of two maps. I'm like, okay, we're just going to have one map, but we can double side it. And that's all we can do because it was way too much to do three boards in there. It's just way too much. So, yeah.
No, I think you have a great explanation of like being able to do that early definitely forecasts and alerts you of potential issues that you might run into if you're not fully keeping cost in mind while you're developing
Yeah.
for Kickstarter. I know.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I know I did the process 2 days ago with just kind of following along your video to do the same thing. And you didn't really mention it, but it actually helped me with understanding of like if I was, because in my head I've been thinking, okay, I want to streamline risk mitigation, so maybe I'm only going to do that one type of game. But it actually forcing me to think of what the deluxe would be was a great way of pre-forecasting what those potential stretch goals could be. And so maybe it's upping the value, and you get to, when you have all those costs, you get to tentatively play around with what you were just saying of figuring out the stretch goals, and that
Right.
was immensely helpful.
Yeah. So as a publisher, you have more margin in your deluxe edition, and especially if you have a retail distribution plan, deluxe is where you're going to make most of your money, because through distribution, you're getting like 37% or so on the dollar of for everything. So it's really it's you're getting you get volume from distribution, which is great,
Right.
but you're not getting margin, and so you get a lot of margin out of deluxe. So then what can you do to make this exciting as possible and make it a no-brainer? You're like, of course I gotta get the deluxe. It comes with this, this, and this. And then the caution here is you still have to watch your costs, because I do see a lot of board game Kickstarters where they add really big things as stretch goals, like a whole new mini or something like that. And but then I see some of them asking later for backers to send more money because they can't afford to ship. And I'm like, you made over $1 million and you're asking for money to ship, and I don't know if
Something's
it's
not
because of
adding
I
up.
don't know what the reasons are, but just be smart with your upgrades and stretch goals, but be exciting about it. So it's I find the best deluxe ones have like some sort of mini expansion or expansion, full expansion that's included with it that you can buy separately elsewhere. And then of course like wood components, chunky components, or cool upgrades to your components. But gameplay, anything that's gameplay that's only in the deluxe has to be, I think, should be available elsewhere somehow in the future.
I totally agree with that sentiment. Gonna promo and say that I'm gonna direct people in this interview back to your channel, but I'm excited to get into the when you talk about going through the process for the game trays insert. That I've had the ideas percolating around, and I'm excited to experience those videos when I get to them. Um, so jumping into the fourth question really quick. In video 7, you talk about going through the process of doing your work back schedule of if you have as a designer like the set date that you want to launch the Kickstarter on, starting to work back systematically. I know you did a lot of it for the work back schedule for the convention. With if you're theorizing that those are fixed dates, sort of knowing when you have to deliver on certain benchmarks um, is a really helpful way to organize all of you know
Yeah,
speaking for
agreed.
myself, the chaos
Yeah,
that goes on in my
yeah.
brain if I don't get it out there. Um,
Deadlines like that give us like, you got to do it. You're like, it's got to be like, I'm going to Gen Con. I gotta like, so you got to do something. You got to be happy with what you do. So
so in the video, you do a lot of examples of more of like the production and game development side of things and prepping for the con. And it seemed lighter in the like sort of the marketing schedule of things as well. And I know for full disclosure to the viewer, I'm only halfway through Jay's series. I've been trying to pace myself as I'm ready to do the things to learn the insight so it's fresh. So maybe all this marketing I've scrolled through the titles. A lot of them are talked about later. But just curious of how much like in the so hypothetically, I'm planning to launch a my crowdfunding in quarter 1 of next year. Sort of, we are 2-ish quarters away from that. I don't know if you have any insight on like work back schedule for marketing things that should be happening right now that I would extremely benefit from, but I think
yeah,
users could learn from as well, or viewers.
yeah. I think anything you can do to be gathering emails right now is definitely good. Um, I did some things. I don't know if it's the right things, and I'm gonna. It's in the video, so you'll see it. But I did like contests. Contests are hit and miss. Like you do grow your email list, and I did contests, and I gave away other games that Sen and I designed, thinking like there's a crossover. If you like games that Sen and I designed, then hey, we got a new one coming out, and that maybe you'll be interested in being marketed to that. So I was trying to. I just wasn't giving away the random hottest game at the moment. I'm giving away something that's relevant to the game that I'm marketing. And so, I did that, and that obviously cost me some money to kind of advertise it and do Facebook ads and all this kind of stuff. And I grew my email list, and I unfortunately I don't have a marketing person. I do right now actually, but back then I didn't have a marketing person to know to do any kind of A/B testing or to do tracking it or to figure out if its effectiveness. So I just did it, and I literally can't even tell you if it was worthwhile. I got more emails out of it. I just don't
Mhm.
know if those are good emails. You know what I mean? Some
That's
people are just
very fair.
contest.
Yep.
But for me, my big thing for board games is the previewers, the content creators, the influencers are really big. And now I do know that they charge money for it, and that is very costly. And that's a tough thing to try to figure out the balance of which ones you want to do because I believe you have to do some of those, and and there's multiple benefits for it. One, you are getting content for your Facebook page that has them doing a demo or explaining the rules, all this stuff, which is going to be huge value to people on your Kickstarter page. That's the benefit one. Two, um, the people that subscribe to their channel are going to at least get a ping that this exists and might watch it. So that you've now broadened yourself out to all the people on their channel. And then three, you're on that content creator's horizon. Your game now. They've seen it. They've played it. And so, when they're doing top 10 lists and top 10 games I'm looking forward to, you get, if it's an awesome game that gets added to that list, all of a sudden it's free advertising. And then everybody I sent that does a preview that you pay for, I don't know if this is part of some of them actually put it in their contract, but I do it anyways. I send a free game to them when it comes out. And then they know about it, they remember it, and hopefully if they liked it, they'll play it, and then they'll do a free review for it at that time. And so you're getting more content at that time, which is just amazing. But that's only valuable if you have distribution. If you don't have distribution, then how are they going to get more games? Unless you
Right.
have, Amazon Play or something like that,
Hmm.
uh, which is fine. And then I had a bit of a different story than most people because, you know, maybe Sen and I have some cachet, our name with regards to the games we've designed. So maybe people are like, oh, it's a new Sen and J game. So maybe there's that. Also, it's based on a comic book. So anybody who likes Matt Kint or my management comic book, he was blasting it out and sharing it and everything. Dark Horse Comics also was also helping communicate this. We did a press release, and Matt had a contact that was able to get it out to some really cool places. Like Hollywood Reporter ran an article about my Kickstarter when it was on. Like, who gets that?
That's awesome.
That's crazy. We got an ad for my Kickstarter in a Matt Kint comic book while my Kickstarter was on, and it was a hot comic at the time.
That's
And
crazy.
some wild things. Always trying to think outside the box and trying to do different things. And then the second Kickstarter that I did for Mind Management, if you know, for those watching, I did two. It was I had 5 days from knowing I was doing it to launching it. 5 days. I did not know 6 days before it launched that I was even doing a Kickstarter at all. I had zero. But then what happened? The Shut Up Sit Down review launched for Mind Management. They loved it, called it a masterpiece, and I'm like, oh my god, I had no inventory left. So I was about to do another print run. I'm like, well, maybe I'll just do another Kickstarter, and then it exploded after that.
Well, as somebody who got in on the second wave, I'm glad you did a second Kickstarter for it.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
seen a lot of love at our table.
awesome.
Um, Kind of circling back to you're talking about those outside of the box ways, that kind of leads me into the final question, or the final pre-con question I'd like to ask in this interview segment is it's technically not from your video series, but it's actually from what tipped me off into your video series. You had an interview with Gabe Barrett from his board game design book called Board Game Kickstarter Advice, and you talk about the while the campaign was running, you had this very unique way of getting backers to play a game of mind management as a way to not only get them to absorb the content for it, but to give them that feeling of like going out and finding the codes and decoding and all that. And I'd highly encourage anyone to, if you're like me and is more of an auditory, to get the Audible app for the book. But I, I'm not going to do it justice talking about the interview right now. But the whole explanation of how it was effective, um, Jay does a really good job getting that across to Gabe, and at least in the audio format, it's repeated in a way that's digestible. I'm curious, sort of the front end of that, of like the planning that went into that, and sort of the time spent, and sort of how you came about kind of creating what I would call like a brilliant way of like I don't know what the ROI is on that, but from a as somebody that if I was able to be part of the first Kickstarter, that would have been like a wow moment as a consumer. Curious of
Yep.
what the front end is for getting something like that to the table.
Awesome. So possibly we're talking about two different things here, and they're both good. The one was the fact that I got people to play mind management during the campaign on the campaign page. And this worked because it's a one versus many game. So they were playing against me. I was the one, and I was hiding secretly moving around. And I would update the board to show that here's the board state. And I would say, what do you want to do next? Talk in the comments. I always encourage motivating people to go to the comment section. I believe there's some algorithms in Kickstarter that two things that there's algorithms in Kickstarter that show an active campaign with a lot of comments. I think helps raise it up into a potentially project we love or gets at least more visible. So I think that's always good to do that. And two, I even think when I go to a Kickstarter that's a few days or a week or 2 weeks into it, and I see 67 comments, it feels kind of like a dead campaign and like not very exciting or engaging. If I go there and there's 650 comments, I'm like, what's going on? This is happening. So I always encourage a lot of comment usage, and I respond to every single comment that anybody ever posts because it just keeps people engaged and excited and being transparent. So I said, hey, talk about to each other. What do you want to do as a move? But at 4 o'clock every day, PST, the very next post that says recommends a move, that's the move I'm going to do. So they would chat with each other on the say, what if we move this guy, move Bill up here, and then we can ask about this. No, 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 don't do that because, and they would chat with each other, and then they would come to an agreement. It was great, and I would update it every day. That's the first thing. The second thing, which I think you're also referring to, is because of the brand and the theme and the IP of Mind Management being a psychic espionage, we leaned into that IP, that brand of espionage, but psychic espionage. And wanted to have fun with all this kind of codes and stuff like that. And so we have basically this secret mission. And if you could solve the secret mission, we unlocked one of these shift packages that are in the game. And those are really like, wow, a whole shift package is going to be added. That's awesome. So people really wanted it, but it was really hard, and it was a really hard puzzle to figure out. And it took a long time to do it. And I hid portions of the instructions on what to do as little codes, and I hid them all over the place on my website, obviously on this campaign page, in some art files, on a media folder that was linked somewhere, in the rule book, and on other existing Kickstarter pages. I contacted people that were going to be running Kickstarter campaigns. I'm like, any way you could put this code somewhere at the bottom, you might get more traffic to your page just because of it. And once people find out about it, like, go to this page, and they have it. That was my only rule: is you can't actually share a code, but you can say where the code is from on the comments. And so that was kind of cool. And then even on the reviewers, I gave them codes. And so if they're doing a video review, they had it flash up at one moment during the video review. So it made people watch the videos even more, which is just a great thing to make people watch your videos of the game being played. And so then they had to go through, and the final direction was they had to they could only do it once the game we were playing was finished, because the code was something about post an image of the three features that the recruiter had in the game that's being played right now on during the campaign. So they wouldn't know that until the campaign was over. That game was over, so they had to contribute to that. So that contributed to that, and then they had to post on social media an image of those three cards. And so then they had access to all the cards in a media folder.
That just the whole explanation of that and the way you were able to marry the two,
Yeah,
that's quite
awesome.
an undertake. Like that's almost like a whole
Yeah,
nother planning for a separate Kickstarter. It feels like.
I know it was a lot, and I think the ROI was good because it's just so on brand. I wasn't able to do anything that fun for Harrow County, but so what we did instead, because we couldn't play the game, it's not a doesn't work that way. But what we did is we created puzzles. We created a game state, and we say, how can the family win in the very next turn? What can they do? And post an image of the card they played to social media.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So like kind of two-part question of um the first is so that the game I'm working on has a lot of solo content that could potentially be group playthrough together. I'm curious on do you think there is a threshold of would it flop if you like say you only had like is there a certain threshold of backers or like active community members you think you'd need to make it work? Because technically it could all work with just one, but
It is, and it's in a way, as long as it's creating energy and talking. I mean, it is. there were definitely, I would say, a handful, like maybe a dozen or up as high as 20 that were actively, visibly connected to the puzzle in the game. There might have been a lot more that just weren't chiming in, but were enjoying the process, which I've heard afterwards that people were. And there were definitely some that came in kind of halfway through and were confused by it and didn't understand what was going on and they couldn't catch up.
Hmm.
So there's some downsides to it too if it's too grandiose like my plan, where they're like, I don't know what any of this is about. But it might have been, if I did it again, I might give a bit more as the campaign went, kind of explain what's happened so far, what do we have to do next, just kind of spell that out to newcomers a bit better.
Gotcha. And then the second part to that was when you're reaching out to other campaigns, like for hiding the codes and all of that. Just the talking a little bit about the receptiveness to the people that you're reaching out to. Of like, was it an
Yeah.
easy message to convey across, or I'm sure there was some that were like, "You want me to do what?" Or
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time, I think everyone that I asked did it because it's like put at the very bottom. I don't care, and I just tried to pitch it saying that because the whole reason about like I think you will get more eyeballs onto your site, which whether they back or not, maybe that still just helps with metrics,
mhm.
and metrics and algorithms might matter for various reasons.
Well, I think that this past half an hour has been great for insightful content for not only myself to learn from, but from anyone that will be watching this when it goes live. I'd like to
Yeah,
wrap up the interview by saying I know you've talked about Harrow County, and I believe that's in sort of the throes of production right now. But when I last checked, I believe you can still late pledge for it.
yep, still up, yep.
Um, is there anything else that you can kind of tease the audience to look forward to, or anything you got going on right now that you'd like to share?
Yeah, if you're going to Gen Con, you can check out Harrow County, and we'll have the final sample from the manufacturer. I should be getting that in the next week or so. I'm told. So very excited about getting hands on that to see how that looks, and I'll bring that to Gen Con. Plus, at Gen Con, you'll be able to demo and look and check out my next game that we're publishing, a third game.
Ooh. So
Exciting.
exciting for those going to Gen Con. But
Yeah, check out the calendar of events or whatever it is, the scheduled events for Gen Con.
and will you be doing kind of a public release afterwards so the Gen Con get the first insight into it, or?
I'll be. I'm trying to announce it ASAP. I have some legal issues about trying to get things approved by certain
Yep.
people beforehand. When you deal with IPs, there's a few more loopholes you have to go through.
Gotcha. Well, as one who has thoroughly enjoyed mind management, is looking forward to seeing what you got coming down the pipeline. And so
I'm
with
excited
that,
to show you.
uh, I appreciate the time you've spent with us today, Jay, and I hope all the audience gets to enjoy this as much as I did.
Thanks so much. Check out offthepagegames.com for any information about upcoming stuff.
Sounds like a plan. I will be doing that as soon as we sign off. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and I hope you have a good one.
Bye.